I recognize the representative from Illinois, Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Chairman Kiley. Assistant Secretary Parker, in November of 2021, OSHA released an emergency temporary standard that would have forced 84 million Americans to take an experimental COVID vaccine or provide their private medical paperwork to their employer. Do you think OSHA has the power to force 84 million Americans to take an experimental vaccine?
You're referring to the vax and test rule that OSHA promulgated in November of 2021. It did require businesses of 100 or more employees to develop a program that would require employees to either take the COVID vaccine or get regular testing.
Yes, so what I want to know is if you believe that OSHA actually has the power to force 84 million Americans to do that.
Well, the Supreme Court ruled on that matter.
Yes, thank God the Supreme Court ruled on that and stopped you from doing that. You're an unelected bureaucrat and you do not have the power to force 84 million people to take an experimental vaccine or show their papers. You tried to fire 84 million American workers, but do you believe the court was wrong?
You know, the court made the final decision on the matter. That's how our judicial system works.
Mm-hmm. And after they made that decision,
finality.
After they made that decision, you actually said to Reuters, this is a quote, "The ruling was unfortunate, but it's not stopping us from pressing employers to take adaptive measures to keep things in place." So did you continue to threaten companies to impose a vaccine mandate, even though the Supreme Court told you that you couldn't? And Chairman, I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
No, we didn't threaten anyone, but there were companies that were looking forward to clarity from the government about these rules and to provide them.
They got the clarity from the Supreme Court and you ignored them and continued to press companies to fire American workers. And we are curious, what was President Biden and OSHA's plan if 84 million Americans refused to comply with the vaccine mandate or show their papers?
That's categorically untrue. We didn't threaten anyone and we didn't demand that anyone be fired.
You absolutely were promoting that. The Supreme Court stopped you, thank God. And in light of considering what would have happened if Americans refused to comply, what was your plan?
Congresswoman, I believe that the American people expect their government to take on the big problems that are facing them. More than 1 million people
well, I'd just like to say, you are inept. It would have terrorized our economy if the American workers refused to comply, and it would have put 84 million American workers out of work. I'm going to introduce amendments to strip you of your power and funding to protect the 84 million Americans who do not want to show you their vaccine papers and to protect farmers who feed Americans. Mr. Chairman, OSHA needs to be reined in. They have gone far beyond their minor limited mission. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Parker, your agency was responsible for issuing an employer vaccine mandate that would have applied to 84 million Americans. Now, the Supreme Court struck that down. It was a scathing opinion about how OSHA had well exceeded its authority in unprecedented ways. Earlier today, you testified that you didn't demand that anyone be fired. So in your contemplation, if a worker did not comply with the requirements of that vaccination or test rule that you promulgated, what would have happened? What would have been the consequence for that employee?
Well, the question that I received earlier from the Congresswoman from Illinois referenced our activity after the ruling was issued. And so it was a reference to our efforts post-Supreme Court decision.
So pre-Supreme Court decision, you did demand that people be fired?
The rule never went into.
Right, but the rule as you wrote it, as you contemplated, as you wanted to go into effect, it did contemplate people will be fired.
It was up to the employer. It didn't prescribe any remedies in the rule for how that would be implemented.
The Supreme Court noted that hundreds of thousands of people could have lost their jobs. You disagree with that?
The Supreme Court was making a preliminary decision. It wasn't a final order. They had a limited record in front of them. But
you see,
I would have to go back and reread the ruling. I don't recall that provision.
Mr. Parker, you're one of a number now of officials in this administration who has come before this committee and tried to tell us that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. Sitting in the chair that you're in now, the Secretary of Education testified, gave false testimony to this committee, denying that he had promoted a student vaccine mandate when he had done precisely that. Sitting in the chair that you're in now, the Secretary of Health and Human Services made one of the most outlandish statements ever entered into the congressional record, which is saying quite a lot, when he said, "We never forced anyone to do anything," in relation to the widely discredited policy of forcing young children as young as 2 years old to wear masks. And now you come before us today, asked about one of the most sweeping abuses of power that we've seen, that was rebuked by the Supreme Court, and you tell us that we didn't demand that anyone be fired. So has there been some sort of memo going around? Why is the administration insistent on rewriting history?
All you have to do is read that rule and you will see that it is not a vaccine mandate. It gives employees the option of testing in lieu of a vaccine mandate.
And if they didn't do that, then what would happen to them?
They would be out of compliance with the requirement, and our role then would be to cite the employer.
I want to clarify your earlier testimony as well. Are you saying that your agency is still pushing forward with a new COVID-19 rule for healthcare at this time?
The rule is in, we proposed that rule in well, I don't recall.
I didn't ask when you initially proposed it. I'm saying, are you still pushing forward with it?
We submitted the rule to the Office of Management and Budget in December of last year. It has remained in review there.
So you're not planning on rescinding it or withdrawing it?
That's a decision that would be made after it goes through the process, and I can't comment on it. That's just...
You can't comment? You don't have an opinion of whether it should be withdrawn?
It's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of me following the rules of the administration.
Sure.
In ensuring that we respect the process of working with OMB.